In Frinton, I'm going to give a demonstration to the local art group, but I just thought I'd come down to the beach and just before I go in. Very nice it is too, a little windy, but really looking forward to the demonstration later this evening. Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I visited the Frinton Art Society last evening and had a lovely evening there. I painted two paintings, but this video concentrates on the first painting that I did. It's of Wharfe Dale and a small building, trees, good tonal contrast. I was looking at painting or showing the group how I paint atmospheric scenes. So I'd like to show you a video I made on that evening. Well, here I am at the Frinton Art Group. Everybody's just beginning to assemble. This is the subject for the first half, and I hope you will enjoy the video. Well, good evening everyone, and welcome to my art evening. I'd like to thank the committee for asking me along. I'm a professional artist. I've been professional since 1998. Crikey, I must have been in short trousers then. Anyway, 1998, and it's been quite a journey. Latter years I've not done quite so much, but I used to do painting holidays to France and Spain. I still write for Leisure Paint. I've been doing that for many years. I was an FSC tutor at Flatford Mill, varying art courses around the country. But in recent years, I've sort of stepped back from teaching a little bit, but I'm concentrating on my YouTube channel really, because that way I can still get out to people without too much travelling around, you know. So anyway, I've been asked along this evening to paint watercolours. I'm hoping, all going well, I'm going to paint one in the first half, one in the second, and the first one, well, both of them are Yorkshire Dales scenes really. I went up there a couple of years ago. I did several sketches in pencil. I use graphite pencil, water soluble. That way you can soften the edges with a damp brush, and the graphite spread creates a softer feel than just pencil. And we was walking from a car park towards Hubberholm, towards in Wharfe Dale, and I spotted this lovely old barn. I think it was originally a house, but I've got a feeling it became derelict and was now used for the sheep did a bit of feeding on the hay in there and all the rest of it. So I think it's what it was. It looked pretty derelict to me. But it's quite a simple subject, quite a high area up in the dales, in the hills there, and we're down in the lower part of the valley. And Hubberholm is just round the corner. So now the thing to do, as you can see from my sketch, it has good tonal contrast. Now that's the key to the way I look at subjects, the fact that you've got good strong light effects, and that in turn can only be shown if you've got good strong dark effects. So it's change and counter change. You know, you've got the large dark tree, but the darkest tree of all is that one there, which is the smaller one. Now if that one were to be really dark and the rest light, it would attract your eye out of the picture. But this time I'm hoping that that will attract the eye, and particularly picks up the corner of that building as well. The corner there and the large tree there. Okay, now the first thing, I'm actually not going to damp the paper. I'm using a number 4, it's not very big actually. I keep hinting that I need bigger ones. With Father Christmas cut, likely to be around the corner. My wife's here this evening. I hope she's listening, but never mind. But anyway, this is a number 4. It's a number 4 that points well. I have one there that doesn't point well, but we'll see how we get on with this one. Right, now I seem to remember that week it was quite a on and off week. We had quite a bit of sun, but we had lots of cloudy areas, cloudy weather. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a nice cloudy feel at the top right hand corner. What am I going to use for that? What am I asking you for? I should know, shouldn't I? Right, let's have a look. Right, I'm going to use Payne's Grey now, but this is the Winsor & Newton Payne's Grey, and that is slightly blue grey. Some of the greys are, I don't very often use greys, but in this instance, Payne's Grey, and I'm just putting a touch of light red with that, just to warm it up, just to give it a bit of warmth to it. Still be quite dark. So we need sort of like a dark cloud there. There we go, look at that. I'd like to have a little bit of cloud top right hand corner. And then I'm softening, in other words, weakening slightly as it goes behind that tree, because that tree is going to be considerably darker. Right, so that's the cloud. Now we have the, could put a little bit of raw sienna now, clean the brush, raw sienna, and just touch in to a couple of places so we get a blend of white and cream shadow work, even just pulling it together there on the horizon, just as it goes away. There we go. Then we're going to have a touch of blue, cobalt blue, because I always like to have a little blue in the colour, because at least it tells us that we do have sort of, hello? We're back again. Lovely. That's all right. I've not gone. I'm still here. There we go. Then clean the brush again. A little bit of yellow with a little bit of light red, just as we go out of picture, like that. There we go. Just in the lower area. Could denote distant trees or whatever. But that's fine. Now, while that's still damp, I'm going to create a bit of background distance, the hills in the distance. Cobalt blue and light red. That's my favourite mix for distant hills. And we've got, we have a hill coming there, and this is going to be quite dark. So this is going to be quite a dark affair, and I wanted it to soften a little bit more blue as we go away into the distance, to denote depth. That's it, and that just sort of sweeps up like that. And notice how I'm putting it in while it's still a little damp. We're getting a nice soft edge to that. So we're getting a nice bit of distance feel there. Good. Probably see one or two little trees standing up here and there, which I can put in particularly where you've got a crispness to that, while it's still damp. There we go, just a hint of a forest area just along that top edge. I think that's all we need to do for that. Right, now we come down into the more foreground, well, middle distance sort of hills, and I'm looking at raw sienna for this, just purely to create a nice feel, and I'm just touching into that so that I'm there again getting a soft edge. That is going away behind that tree. Behind that tree, I want to keep simple because that's going to dominate. A little bit of blue now going in there just to give it a little bit of depth. Like that. Yep. Little bit of raw sienna again, a little bit stronger as we come in across that area there. Oh, and that actually turns across there like that. That's it. Look at that. There we go. It's quite high, that area there. Yep, that's got a lovely feel of depth there now. Soften it just a touch behind there. so we've not got too much colour. Now as we come forward, I'm going to add cadmium yellow with a touch of cobalt blue, because the greens will get fresher as we come forward. That way the building looks as if it the building stands forward and the greens just tuck back behind it. And this side I'm going to use cadmium yellow and a little bit of red, because I want to get a feel, and I'm going to have the light coming from the left, so I want to get a feeling of a glow there. Go. So we've got a nice feeling of depth. This is the thing, you've got to get that feeling of perspective within the colours as well. Right, now lemon yellow with cobalt blue, because we do have like a wooded area there, but I only want that to be soft. I don't want that, we can paint over that because it'll be very, very dark. So now I'm indicating, without too much detail, the feeling of a soft sort of, let's just be a little bit stronger with that. Just a little bit more yellow, a little bit more blue, and there we go. Just to get a sense that we've got trees there in the distance. And the problem is, if you start to put in too much detail, it never normally works. It's far better to keep everything nice and clean and soft in the background. A bit more red, a little bit more yellow in there, just as we go through into the distance. I think that field will probably finish somewhere there. There we go. And then we come into the more foreground field beyond the gate. Now this side, yellow, little bit of red, but I want this to glow. I want to have a bit of a glow here behind what will be sunlit trees. Well, that's a theory, but we never know, do we? What's going to happen? That is very true. Right, now we'll go around that building there, along the edge there. There we go. Two little touches there in that area. Just a little bit, there's like a tree standing behind there. A couple of trees there. Nice and blurred. Don't look like trees, they don't need to look like trees. Not at this stage anyway. Right, clean the brush, and as we come down, a bit more yellow, a bit more red, to get a nice orange glow behind these trees. And particularly in the distance here. Ah, look at that. Lovely streak of yellow. Look at that. I like that. That should work quite well. There we go. Begin to get a feel of depth up into the distance, a little bit as we come forward. A bit of red now. There we go. Cadmium red. Now, that is the top of the stone walls. They're lovely, aren't they, up in the dales? Lovely old stone walls, really really shine out. Good. Now I'm going to use the yellow again, because I want a little bit of light behind here. So banging in that yellow again, that's just blending with that. That's the gate opening. There, just on the edge of that field. That's good. So it just shows that glow continues behind right the way through. Now I'm adding a little bit more blue, which I've already got in my palette. And then top of that, just a little bit there. I think we may be able to see that. And that's the top of the wall on the other side. So you've got the two walls tapering to the distance there. I think coming along quite well, you know. It's lots of little bits and pieces, yeah. Right, now let me do the road. Right, light red, touch of the Payne's grey, just to knock it back. Start off with quite a dull grey. There we go. And notice how I'm painting now across the paper. Because the road lays flat, I always like to paint across. If the road were to be undulating a bit, then I would paint the same as the contour of the road. That's my theory behind this sort of painting. So we paint across the road like that. Perfect. Yep. And as I come forward, I'm going to really give it a nice bit of oomph. I'm going to give it a bit of oomph. It's a technical term, but I think I know what I mean. And there we are. We want to make this large road area, it's got to have a little bit of interest. We don't want that road to be too just too flat. It needs to have a little bit of interest, so a little bit of sort of texture, a good feeling of depth running away into the distance. That's good. Now, Cotswold stone, right. My favourite mix for Cotswold stone, which we're not painting today, you know, as I said, my favourite mix for any stone, there we are, that's covered everything, is light red, raw sienna, and cobalt blue, right? So those three colours, basically the primaries really, although they're not brilliant primaries, but those three colours mixed together in their right forms will give you all manner of greys, greeny greys, reddy greys, blue greys, depending on what part of the north you're in with the stone. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use light red to start. I'm going to put raw sienna with that. You could use yellow ochre. So put those two colours first because that gives you the fresh colour. Then if you add a little bit of blue, you can then see exactly what you're getting. And I think that that colour is not far off. Right, let's get a mill stick out so as I can, right, is this the sunny side? Well, let's have a look. Oh yes, yep, there we go. And I'm quite uneven at the top because that's where I'm putting the stones on the top first. And notice how I'm getting bolder with the brush strokes as I come forward, because that is the key to getting the size, the depth. Then, a little bit more blue in this now. I'm going to paint in the stone themselves. There we go. And I'm trying to leave some gaps here and there to give an indication that there are some light, dark, medium sort of tone in there. Now as I come forward, more blue, a bit more red, just to create a more grey stone. And I'm just dropping that back in here and there, so it's not all the same. A bit more grey, a bit more red now. Nice to have a bit of gauge of colour there. Don't normally put a great deal of detail in, so let's just bang that in like that. There we go. Yep, that'll be quite sufficient for these. Just try and give a bit of a definition there. That's good. And a little bit on the corner there as it goes around the corner. I've got to fill that in shortly. Now on the left hand side, I'm adding more blue and more red because this is technically in shadow. So, a little touch of that there. There we go. Too much detail. That's it, a bit more red. Just to warm it up as it comes forward. 1 or 2 little touches of this into there, which is where the darker areas are. There we go. And a little bit of light into this here and there, albeit quite solid really. A bit more blue. A bit of that muddy colour in, there you go. Look at that. With all these things, it really is the shadows that make a picture. But of course, all these background colours need to be put in, because if you don't, I think it looks a little bit uninteresting. There we are, yeah, a little bit darker like that side. Then as we go away into the distance, a bit more blue in the colour, because it's just going round the corner. There's a couple of figures there that were actually there when I was walking along there. So technically they're going to be in shadow, I think. So there we are. So it doesn't matter if it's dark there, you see, because it's already got that feeling of that little bit of a shadow coming across. Good. Now the building, same thing. The only thing is that on the sunlit side, I'm going to be very, very light, trying to get a feeling of sunlight onto that stone. There we go, like that. Bead of white on top of. So we've got a separation between the stone on the building and the stone wall. Now I'm going to paint that area that's not in full sunlight, but it's not in complete shadow. So it's a medium tone. So lots of buildings you get lights, mediums and darks. Sunlit, an area that's not in sunlight, but it's not in shadow, then you get the dark shadows. So you have those 3 sections. So this time I'm going to add a little bit of that blue and a little bit of red to that, just to give me that slightly darker, there we are, a bit of yellow in there, a bit of red, a little bit of blue, there we go. So there again, it's this slightly darker tone. Eventually, I'm going to paint around the windows. Gives me the option then to have them lighter or darker in places. There we go. And that then comes down there like that. So we've got the sunlit side and then the slightly shadowed side. This can also be used for the wall in the background there. Runs away like that, away like that. There we go. Brilliant. So that's that. Now the roof. Now the roof areas, actually going to use the same 3 colours, but this time going to be considerably darker, because these roofs are, you know, the old slates are very weathered, so they do need to be considerably darker, albeit leave a little touch here and there. There we are, that's quite dark, but let's, feeling that it could go a tone darker than that. Let's just see whether that is any darker. There we go. I know it's in sunlight, but having said that, still needs to have a little bit of, there we go. And I'm leaving that just quite plain really. And don't forget the overhang on the, where the roof overhangs the wall. So easy to forget that. You just finish on the wall and there's nowhere for the water to run, you know. Now, of course, on the back edge you can see the tiles, and that roof seems to run, it's one of those roofs that come down and runs away. Ooh, that looks better on there than it does on there. Right, let's put the windows in while we've got the chance. More blue in the mix. Now, that's just an opening. That's not a window. So there's no glazing there. I got a feeling there was some glazing in this, but I'm not really sure. And there. That's that. And of course, we have a window there. All right. So we get the shadow across the top, down the left, across the top, down the left. And that then creates that feeling that we've got windows. Quite easy, isn't it? You know, I mean, there's nothing much to it, you know. I'm going to use burnt umber now into that because I want to show off the gate posts there and the gate. If I can get this brush to work. Come on, work up. There we go. I think that's sufficient as an old broken gate. Good. Okay, so that really is more or less laying out the subject. You know, that sets the scene for us to now put in varying parts. But just before I finish on that area, I'm going to use, let's use cadmium yellow with Windsor blue and a touch of burnt umber. Not too much burnt umber. There we go. And because what I'm going to do, I'm going to paint in the grass areas. Now to start with, I'm going to start off very yellow, and that's the grassy areas along the edge there, like that. And start off dull in the distance. Actually, it just goes around the corner. So, you know, so that's the grassy area like that. Now I'm going to introduce something a little fresher. A bit more sort of green. These sort of grass verges are quite rough edged. We don't want anything too clean. A bit more yellow now, just to give that lovely feeling of a nice, rich, sunlit green. There we go. Bring it down the bank like that. Yep. And as we come forward, we introduce a little more blue that gives us an even richer green. But when you change colour, whatever you do to the left, you've got to do to the right. Otherwise, you get one colour one side, then you try and match. It never seems to work for me. And all of a sudden, you've got that lovely feeling of a bank. You've got the wall, you've got the bank. Yeah, basically, that's coming along pretty good. Right, now I'm going to look at going back again, okay? I'm going to look at painting. Let's use a smaller brush for this. What have we got in the distance? Right, we do have some very dull, sort of bluey, blue greens. Very blue, dull greens. There you go. Quite dark. And these are going to sit on that horizon. Like a tree, a bit of hedging, like that. And use the finger, if you like, just to drag it up. There we are. Two little gaps. So this is the hedging and whatever's going on in the sort of middle distance, really. And it runs to there. It's like a wooded area in the middle there, I believe. possibly. And then we add a little bit more other colour, and then we start dragging down to create. Let's do the side of the brush. Oh, there you go. Look at that, that's better. It's more of a wooded area really as it goes up out of picture. There we are. So that's in the valley beyond the foreground, but of course beyond that is that very blurred, distant background, which is a hill or whatever in the background there. Good. Now, with the same brush, we've got a bit of a wooded area before we come to the foreground trees. So I'm going to use that yellowy colour. It's cadmium yellow, a little bit of Windsor blue, and a little bit of burnt umber. And we've got sort of like a tree-like shape there. And this is just going to be suggested because that's a very dark tree there, and that's just going to shape up the edge of that field. There we go. That dark tree will well and truly overpower that. So that's one tree that stands behind that building. That's the big tree that's going to be considerably darker. There's another area of a wooded tree there. Let's just bring that and continue that through because that's going to be considerably darker. There we go. So that denotes just a feeling of a woodland area just in the distance, like that. There we go. Yep. And there's a lovely bit of glow there. I wonder whether I can pick that up or not. Probably not, but there you go. There you go. Let's just leave that lovely little glow in that area there. And then just going to soften that just with water, just so that it goes behind those trees there. So that when I actually paint these trees in, there's something behind them. You've got to have something behind them. If you paint around them, then you've just got white paper and you can't fill it all, you know. So when you've got trees, you're bound to have gaps. You're bound to have, you know, overhanging branches with gaps behind. So always have something behind them. So that's the theory of it. And this is where you start just sort of slapping it on, really, you know. Purely because I know that I've got trees coming in front of that, so whatever I do there, I can't really go wrong, you know. So all of a sudden we're beginning to get that feeling of depth, you know, not only with the drawing of the perspective, but also the colour perspective. In other words, rich greens, medium tone, slightly off-tone greens, then really dark. It could have been green, but it's sort of like a grey, distant hill in the background. So that's that. One or two little touches on the building, raw sienna. Sometimes they have these lovely sort of stones that run over the lintel stones there. That also helps to give the building a little bit of extra life. What else have we got? Let's get the trees in, look. Let's not mess around. You know, why shouldn't we get those in? Right. Now I'm using number 12 brush. It's very old. It's probably only a number 10 now, because it's all worn away. But it's ideal for trees. And for that large tree there, I'm going to use cadmium yellow. Maybe a bit of raw sienna in there, but cadmium yellow with a little Windsor blue and a touch of burnt sienna. Now to start with, you only put a little burnt sienna in. This is very careful with the way you use it. You use it really. Right, so we're fairly open there because we want to show, that's it, want to show some branch work there. Good. Right you are. A bit more blue in there now, just to slightly darken. More blue, more brown you add, the darker the colour. And really, it's just a matter of being bold enough to suggest overhanging branches without the need to paint every single leaf. That's the hardest part. What I'm doing, I'm painting the branches as they overhang and not individual leafing. Okay, so that's the theory of it. Right, more blue and more brown now, because as I come down, I'm going to get darker. But just before I come down, underneath the overhang of those branches, I'm going darker, because that will give me that sense of little bit of depth within the tree itself. There we go. That's good. Right, bit more brown, bit more blue. There we go. And here we go again. Really dark. Must be bold enough in places, because unless you've got darks, you're not going to see the light. There we are, look at that. Right, ease it in, go on. There we go. That's pretty much as I would have expected. More blue, more brown. Too much blue, but and even within that light area, one or two little touches will make all the difference to the final outcome. And down you come into the lower part of that tree, like that. There we are. Then more blue, more brown, a very, very strong mix. Just mainly on the left hand side, because you've got to remember that the right hand side, mainly on the right hand side, because the left hand side technically is in sunlight. So there we go. A bit more blue. Now let's go really dark. Don't want to go too dark because we've got to save that dark really for that area there. Although most trees are fairly dark right on the underneath side there, where it overhangs into. That's okay. Now when you paint like that, allow it all to dry, because some areas are dry, some areas are semi-dry and other areas are wet. The wet areas will be the darkest. The lightest areas will be the dry areas. You want that all to blend together. So we can't really see the tones we've got. We've got a rough idea until it all completely dries. Okay? So that's that. I'll put the trunk in shortly. Now I'm going to concentrate on the real dark one. Let's use the same brush. Right, more blue with burnt umber. So it's burnt umber and Windsor blue, phthalo blue, Prussian blue. They're all pretty much the sort of blues that I would use. And this one is a similar sort of tree, but as you can see, it's going to be particularly dark. And that will show up that lovely, the sunlight on the corner of that building, on the end of that building there. There we are. And there again, pick up the shape. Not worried about the centre in this one at all. It's got to be just, there we go, look at that. And it picks up the corner of that building just like that. Okay. So that's one tone darker than anything else that I will have in this scene. And also shows the wall up very nicely too. So it's all about darks and lights. We're beginning to get that lovely tonal feel that, yeah. Good. Now we'll do the trees on the other side. Now let's clean the brush. Now I've got 3 there, right? 1, 2, 3. Now what I'm going to do, the light one, medium tone, then the slightly darker one. Go. Clean that brush. Right. Let's use cadmium yellow with a little raw sienna just to knock that back, with a touch of cobalt blue this time, just to start off the filling of green. Okay. And there again, I'm using the brush on the side again. Just gently picking up, trying to get a slightly different strata of tree, but whether that really comes off or not, I'm not sure. There we go. And down we come. We will see the trunk there. Now I'm going a bit of brown in there now. I'm going into that dark mix that I used there, purely because I want to save paint. You know, it's hard times at the moment, you know. We certainly don't want to use a bit more yellow in there. Use paint that's laying around on the palette. There we go, so that's slightly darker, but not too dark. I don't want these to compete with the one on the right. That's the key to it. That one there, or even, indeed that one. There we go. Down we come to this lower area there. And this time, I'm going to pick up a bit of dark, just to pick up some darker touches on that right-hand side, so that overhangs that other tree there. There we go. So that we've got a feeling of shape and roundness to that. That's good. I think I'll leave that as it is. Then, finally, a bit more yellow now to give this one a real sort of sense. Just lose some paint from the brush. There we go. That. And be a bit more bold with your trees as they're more in the foreground area, because it always helps to be nice and bold with the brush strokes. The nearer you get, the closer you get to the foreground. Now I'm going to go darker with this one. That's a bit too dark. More yellow. A bit more water. There we are. Lose some paint. There we go. There we are. And that one's going to overhang that one as well. There you go. Look at that. Leave 1 or 2 gaps. Let's just go a little darker, so we can definitely see where one finishes and the other one begins. There we are. And that's going to hang down there like that. Good. So that's basically the 3 trees together that actually encloses everything. It sends your eye into the picture. Yep. So that's looking good. Right. Now I'm going to paint in the trunk. That one. For that one, I'm using burnt umber with a touch of ultramarine. Mainly burnt umber, but I don't want it to be, I want it to be quite dark, but I don't want it to have any too brown really, because I don't want it to attract the eye. And that's a big old tree, so that would be quite a large trunk. Like that, and that finishes just before it gets to that wall there. So that's the trunk. Then we have part of the trunk coming again there. And then we have a nice branch, nice big chunky branch that heads off that way. What else have we got? Oh, right, okay. Yeah, okay, yeah, we'll put another split trunk in there, just where it's beginning to split. And I always say it's not until you get the trunk and the branches in that it begins to look like a tree. It really is the key to painting trees, really, trunk and branches. Now I'm going to use just a small rigger now to do the rest of the branches, because I don't want that to get too wide. There we go. And that just springs up there like that. You'll have the odd branch breaking out here and there. You may have one breaking out there. Yeah, a little bit there. A little bit of a branch there. Another one perhaps breaking out there. You'll see one or two. What I would say is too many in. Can always go back to it, but once you put too many, you know, you think, oh, I don't know, this is just a bit overfull there, and before you know it, you end up trying to rub them out, and it just spoils the complete effect. I mean, it's something that I have done many times, so hence I'm trying to make certain that you don't, you see. Right, now we've got the trunk to this one there. May just see a bit of the trunk there, and then some smaller stuff up there. Not going to do too much to that one because that sits well back. This one, where does the trunk come? Well, I certainly not where I've got my drawing anyway, so I'm going to have to just put it anywhere. Just don't worry about it. The trunk should come there, I think. That's my idea of where that trunk should be. That's it. And then we can have, it needs to be a reasonable thickness, because it's, you know, the trunk and branches have to denote the type of tree that you've got, you know, the weight to the tree. You have a little weedy little trunk and bold leafing, it never looks right. Vice versa, you have a massive great trunk and just a small bit of leafing. So generally, general rule of thumb, that's what I would say anyway. So then it just splits again there. A few more branches in that one. Yep. Right, and then this one, the trunk sort of sits right on the end there to be correct. There we go. And that's got to be of a reasonable size. Yep, and then we have thickness there again, and the branch just comes up there like that. You know, if you're not careful, they end up being all the same. So let's try and do something a bit different. There we are. Nice branch there. I think that's sufficient for those trees. Right, just before we look at shadows, I'm going to put in, using this same dark brown, I'm going to put in a little bit of detail. We're going to have shadow coming across there. So let's do this side first. With the rigger, you're going to have small little sections that denotes the top of the wall. There, and they will get closer and less and smaller as they go away into the distance, until eventually you probably won't see them. Then you have some sections there like that where they actually sit, so that's pretty much the top of the wall there, like that. It's all about shadow really, not about detail, but it's nice just to have a little bit of something going on there. And then let's just be a little weak with that, because what I want to do is to show a few, there we go, a few of the darker stones perhaps within that wall, like that. Perfect. And some of them are quite large in the foreground. Sometimes you just see sections of it. And then as we go away into the distance, it becomes less and less. There we go. Yep. There we go. A little bit there, a little bit there. And as we go away into the distance, you don't see much at all. And then finally, sometimes you see a little bit of area where it sits against the glass. There we go. Yeah, I think that's sufficient as what we're looking for there. Right, here we go again. All of varying sort of size of bricks standing up down the wall. And we just suggest that. Like that. And then we suggest sections of darker trees, stones. Two little uprights, one or two there, one or two there. And as we go away into the distance, and then a little bit more here where it sits on to the ground, just sharpens that up. Good. Okay. 5 minutes. Right. 5 minutes to put some shadow work on. What do we do for shadows? Right, well, I'm going to use this large mop brush again that points, and the shadows, I'm going to use cobalt blue and a bit of the other colour that was muddy on my palette, but mainly cobalt blue with some Indian red. There we go, look at that. Perfect. Well, hopefully anyway. Right, not too dark, not too light. We've got to make certain that we get that sense of light coming across. Okay, the overhanging shadow for the gutter area there. And whenever you do these, make certain they're deep enough. We don't want them to be too narrow, because if they are, then they don't really show. And then a little bit on the door there. Then, because the sun is coming just around the corner, you're going to have a secondary shadow like that. So you've got the shadow with the sun, you've got the against the real sunlight, and the secondary shadow against an area that's just beginning to come into shadow. Right, let's go a little bit darker with that. Just like to see it a little bit darker. There we go. Let's bring that out just a touch more. Now, under the lintel and down the left-hand side of the window there, under there, down the left. That's it. A little bit there, a little bit under there and down the left. That's good. Now that makes that sunlit really. It really does give that building a fountain of sunlight. And of course, with the sun coming here, then some of that wall could possibly be in sunlight, in shadow. So that's why I've put that like that. So that's the overhang of the building in the background. Put a little bit of that there, a little bit there. The overhang of that may very well cast a shadow there, and indeed across that bit there. Not all of it, but some of it. There we go, so like a dappled shadow underneath that just where the overhang is. Good. Right, now we go with the main shadow, cobalt blue, Indian red. Okay, that tree would cast a shadow like that. That would all be in shadow, that wall there. A bit more water. Okay. So that's all going to be in shadow eventually, but let's just work like this. Then we're going across the lane like that and up the wall the other side. And that's cast from that tree that stands there. Okay. Then the figures can then be put in very carefully because they are now in shadow. So we don't need to worry about colours then, you know, they're in complete shadow. To make certain that runs like that nicely. There we go. Now we have shadow there, then we have another shadow then from the wall. The wall would cast a shadow, I suppose. Then you've got this one here, and that casts across as well. It really is shadows that that are the key, really, to my paintings, really. You know, anyone that has seen paintings that I do, it really is the shadow work that I try to create the atmosphere. Yeah, so that one is for that tree. And finally, we have this one here. And let's not go too silly. Let's not get too excited. A bit more red in there now. Yeah, why not? You know. Right. Okay. Bit there. Obviously, this is all in shadow. There we go. Shadow along there. Oh, keep the way the wall stands. That's it. Good. Then, a nice dab of blue. I like that word, dab of blue. And here we go. Don't see any light there. And all of a sudden you get that feeling of a lovely foreground shadow running across from that tree. Finally, one or two little touches just before we have the break, along the edge there, one or two little touches along the area there, one or two little touches there, just to denote that. Sharpen up those figures a little bit more, a bit sharper there. And then finally, before we finish, we need to take off the surround. My favourite moment. And that gives you a lovely feeling of a mantic picture. And that is pretty much the first half.